On May 15, 2020, a video was uploaded onto the YouTube channel The First Take. In the video, a girl who introduced herself as Ikura invited the audience to hear her group's song, which she hoped would support them through the pandemic quarantine, even if just a little bit. Her soft-spokenness, the scrappy lighting and camera quality, and how she has to press a button herself to start the backing track, all gave the video an amateur charm. But the moment she started singing, her talent became undeniable. Her voice was youthful, soothing, but bold and emotive, and it pierced through the blissfully constructed, Vocaloid-influenced production with a sincerity and grace that captured me and millions around the world stuck in self-isolation. It was an innocent and real moment of music doing what music does best, connecting with people and making them feel just a bit better in the hardest of times. The song was called Yoru ni Kakeru, and they were YOASOBI. But you didn't need me to tell you that, because in the 5 years between me not telling you that, they've become the biggest thing ever and I hate it. Ayase is a man, a Senjo Gahara fan, so a brother. Born in a musical environment, he and his buddies made a band called Da Vinci in high school and started writing some very inoffensive pop rock music. He then dropped out of high school, Jokyo to Tokyo, and predictably floundered like countless indie bands struggling to make a name for themselves in the big city. Always stressing over how to make ends meet in a one-room apartment eventually got to him. And in 2016, he contracted peptic ulcer disease, which I think looks pretty bad. And then his long-term girlfriend broke up with him too, so he really had it rough. But bedridden in the hospital at the lowest point of his life, he serendipitously encountered Vocaloid on Nico Nico and fell in love with the independent internet music scene, or as it would be later called, Yakose. Put a pin in that. Realizing the flexibility Vocaloid software brought him, Ayase started uploading covers and original songs, whose catchy melodies and anguished lyrics often based on his real experiences caught the ears of many an equally miserable internet dweller. These songs eventually got so popular that he was approached by the short story website monogatari.com to contribute music to an interesting project they were testing out. Put a pin in that too. He said yes, they said you need a vocalist, he went on IG Live and said okay her. Since they had separate careers in the day and could only record their music at night, Ayase called the duo YOASOBI, which roughly translates to something like nightlife or to play at night, symbolizing how making music together provided a joyous freedom and escape from their normal day-to-day. Then the first song they made with a total budget of 1 karaoke booth became the most streamed Japanese song of all time, and they broke more records, and I'm pretty sure the next crowning of the emperor is going to be scored by YOASOBI. If you think all of this sounds like the most by-the-books, romantic underdog story, you will be correct. But it's all undeniably real, and it's incredible precisely because of how unreal it sounds. Their success is a testament that organic, genuine resonance with the audience can still propel you to the very top in this oversaturated internet age. And as I learned about all the history and hardships Ayase went through to reach this point, it became impossible for me not to root for them, not to be inspired by them, as a fellow floundering artist. At some level, I was also probably glad to affirm myself that the authenticity in that video I looped way too many times was genuine. But we'll get to that later. And all of this just makes their current state that much more frustrating. And no, it's not because they got too mainstream or some shit. They came out the gate already so mainstream, the gate was beyond any condition for anyone to gatekeep. What I'm really lamenting here is something I haven't heard anybody on YouTube talk about. The loss of something they used to represent. Something far larger and more meaningful than just themselves. In other words, they fell off. Side A, Nocturnal, Novelized, nBlistering youth. When obnoxious internet music fans say an artist fell off, what they usually mean is that they are not an active participant in the culture anymore, without any sway in its current trajectory. This phrase being applied to YOASOBI may have raised a few eyebrows, because to most people, YOASOBI has always been just another ubiquitous pop group that made songs a lot of people like, but never had any legitimacy in broader culture outside of their commercial success. Like Bruno Mars. He's popular as fuck, everybody at least likes a song or two, but you can never find me a Bruno Mars diehard, nor can you say he's really shifted pop culture in any meaningful way. But I'm saying YOASOBI is like Bruno Mars but better because there's two of them. To get what I'm trying to bitch about here, we first have to understand what made them genuinely artistically fascinating. There are 3 elements that made early YOASOBI what it was: the visceral, the contextual, and the cultural. And I'll start with the one that's the closest to my personal experience, which also happens to be the hardest to describe. Or maybe they're all hard to describe, I don't know, I still need to finish this. That performance on the first take left a bigger impression than I would realize, because from 2020 to 2022, I considered myself a YOASOBI diehard. Curiously, it wasn't the constant replay of their first 2 EPs, or how I tried to learn everything about them that made me call myself that, even though you could. It was more because, for the first time in my adolescence, my level of appreciation for an artist went beyond liking the songs. In fact, I didn't know why I was so attached to these simple, catchy, pretty formulaic J-pop tunes, but some intangible texture in their music just enthralled me in a way I couldn't put into words back then. And although now I realize recorded words are like statues of waterfalls, I will try my best here in respect to my 14-year-old self, who definitely needed more of that. A lot of my favorite Japanese music captures the joyous nostalgia and energy of youth. This is not exclusive to Eastern music, of course, but in my experience, they are the ones to do it with the most gusto and romanticism. From the old city pop that I can't really get into, to modern bands like Master the Fermenting Dregs, Tricot, and Pasteboard, that drawl of longing for a better time is goddamn palpable. And I'd argue YOASOBI, despite looking like a run-of-the-mill pop duo, is the latest permeation in this long tradition of celebrating youth. Except, their portrayal of adolescence is a distinctly nocturnal, digitized one. Lila Sikuta, or Ikura, is Slay Queen, Stan. Oh my gosh, she's so gorgeous. But when she and Ayase were just starting out, she wasn't much more than a uni student and an amateur singer-songwriter who was in a few TV programs. She didn't even see herself as a vocalist, and felt uncomfortable singing other people's songs, but decided to join YOASOBI explicitly to better her singing skills. This is all to say, on their first release, The Book, she wasn't exactly Mariah Carey or Hikaru Utada. But, wouldn't you believe it? That's exactly the element that made everything tick. Like the performance everyone had fallen in love with, Ikura's singing is innocent and youthful, and her voice is one of a kind, even very early on. But maybe due to shyness or inexperience, she wasn't always the most expressive on the mic. What didn't help was that unlike the live version, which was significantly slowed down, Ayase's proclivity for insanely fast rhythmic sections designed for, well, Vocaloid instead of humans, often made Ikura just sound awkward in the studio version. Due to maybe a filter on her voice, or a texture created when it laid on top of these synthesized piano leads, or maybe bad mixing, her singing often sounds kind of inhuman and robotic. Almost as if her emotions were being obscured through this swirl of digital dance bliss. Here was this young girl, belting through these often incredibly dramatic, swelling compositions, but always feeling disconnected, always sounding like she can't fully emote. Maybe due to her own anxieties, or, more unsettling, the limitations of the medium she's stuck in. Ayase's production on these songs, incorporating dance and indie rock influences, are nothing but uplifting and sweet, but the contrast her inhuman vocal strikes with it carries an additional subtle, despondent melancholy, almost like it's portraying a difficulty of connection for the youth in the internet age. What's more, she's not just singing about nothing. In fact, she's not even singing as herself. These words are not her own, or even the lyric writer Ayase's. This is where the contextual comes in. The project, Monogatari.com's founder Yohei Yashiro assigned YOASOBI was to adapt some of the site's short stories into songs. In other words, novel into music. Their first singles, including the smash hit Yoru ni Kakeru, were all inspired by stories submitted by amateur writers, fellow internet denizens with nothing but an idea that resonated, much like a certain Vocaloid producer in 2018. These ideas, like how stories on the internet can be, are often uncompromising. Yoru ni Kakeru famously hid a story about suicide between its bright instrumentals. As the duo kept on producing songs to assemble the book, they even started their own short story contest on Monogatari, the winners of which would get their own work adapted. This, first of all, is a really cool concept for a band, but it also meant that almost every song on the book are distillations of someone else's creative expression, only delivered through Ikura. This hopelessly digital vessel, taking in stray narratives, emotions, and persons from the interconnected mainframe, embodying them for however long the song lasts, while her own voice, her own humanity, is buried under. She is at the same time transmitting vast amounts of human experience, but also feeling like she can never reach anybody. I don't know about you, but that to me is the essence of growing up in the internet age. With no perspective, no reservations, we are swarmed by stories, full lives that unfold with glamour or crash down in front of us every second, with every new voice making us feel more lost, all the while we grapple with if any of this shit can really count as communication, if any of this even matters at all. No wonder this music resonates with so many young people. YOASOBI, like so much great art, doesn't just discuss the experience, but embodies it. Every step of the way, it proves itself to be a multi-layered, true artifact of this generation. Am I reading too deep into this? No, you're not reading deep enough! This, in excruciating detail, was the quality that attracted me to YOASOBI's music. But I'm not gonna say most of this was something everybody picked up on. I can say all of this and you can still find their songwriting to be bland. And there are many less verbose, but equally valid reasons to find their early work artistically worthwhile. For one, after listening to much more music, I realized that this is often the electrifying excitement a good debut shows you. Not every kink is worked out, not every song might hit, but something undoubtedly special arises from that imperfection. Like how MC Riot on Ex-Military hasn't fully figured out his industrial grouse yet. Leave a comment if you knew what I was talking about. I'm trying to see something. But what's interesting is that YOASOBI's breakout actually went beyond simply being a good debut. What if I told you that the book majorly contributed to a movement that would shape the entire J-pop industry even to this day? And that's where our final element, the cultural, comes into play. Yakose, translating to nocturnal or night-loving, is a J-pop scene originating from the late 2010s. Unlike a genre or a style, a musical scene refers to the community from a particular time and place around the music, rather than the elements within the music itself. Black MIDI and Black Country New Road don't have a lot in common besides unhinged lyrics, but since they both gained traction in recent years at the Windmill Pub in Brixton, London, they are connected through the windmill scene. In a similar way, Yakose artists are connected through two main characteristics: their independent internet popularity through platforms like NND and YouTube, and the heavy influence of Vocaloid culture, such as stylized music videos and art that usually provided anonymity. The name itself came from a social media trend that groups together three of the pioneers of the scene, all with night in their name: Zutomayo, Yorushika, and YOASOBI. These artists are still pretty distinct from one another. Yorushika, although having a similar producer-vocalist pairing, is much more indie rock influenced. YOASOBI, from all the biography I gave you, is obviously not anonymous. And Zutomayo is just a straight-up rock band with only apparent ties to Vocaloid. Well, as far as we know. But a scene is not just the artist and the place, it's also the audience. And these guys' internet presence very much operated in the same anime-adjacent space, with the same fervent fanbase listening to them. To me, it made sense why. Their music, for a lack of a better word, just had a feeling to it that was vibrant yet woefully dramatic, perfectly expressing a youthful energy in stylings familiar to the anime-obsessed, Vocaloid listening adolescent audience. Like, just look at their band names and tell me this doesn't scream teenage angst. It would be nice if it was midnight all the time. I could only sleep at night. What does that even mean? But you could still say that all of this is, in a sense, nothing new. Vocaloid music, which is something I don't have the time nor the expertise to tell you much about in detail, has been a staple in doujin works and nerd internet culture for 2 decades at this point. Similarly, the lineage of overdramatic compositions with every electronic and rock influence under the sun is very traceable and visible to this day. Vocaloid producers like Kenshi Yonezu have gone on to become the biggest J-pop stars, and even the pairing of a producer and a female vocalist has been done before with Supercell. But I think what separates Yakose from the previous iterations is, well, something quite obvious: the scale. Compared to the NND era, where 70k views meant you were blowing up, the internet has matured and fucking fermented through the 2010s. And as Japan gained more and more worldwide attention, Yakose artists have garnered an unprecedented international audience in today's youth. Right now, I bet if I said anime music, half of anime fans would jump to YOASOBI, Eve, Zutomayo, and any of these guys in their minds. These artists have shaped the image of Japan, anime, and J-pop music as a whole for a brand new generation, and their ubiquitous success has only influenced the people up next like Yama, Sayuri, and Ado, who started by doing Vocaloid covers and are continuing the youthful spirit of Yakose. Well, to an extent, because I don't know what's happening to Ado anymore. The First Take, a series that was barely a thing when YOASOBI started on it, is now a bona fide cultural institution in Japan, an artist's appearance on it representing a certain status and level of popularity. My boy Hakushi Asagawa finally got on it, let's go! What started as a niche thing only otakus played in conventions is now seeped its influence into the top of the J-music world, and the reasons are hopefully obvious after everything I just said. Because this music is made by people like us, for people like us. Young people who, on top of all the societal expectations, are also trapped in the shared existential nightmare that is the internet. A place we can't separate ourselves from, but a place that on some level we know feels wrong. And YOASOBI, being the moodiest, most nocturnal out of the Yakose Big 3, is the one to express that in the most deceptively simple but compelling way. This is what YOASOBI represents: a texture, a conglomerate of us, and an era defined by us. Were a lot of people still simply unimpressed and would rather listen to Shinsei Kamate-chan? Yeah, probably, and I wouldn't blame them. But it is, I think, undeniable that this musical duo wasn't just the next hot thing, but was actually genuinely meaningful to the world of music. So of course they fucked it up. Side B, it's all AKASAKA's fault. Everything for YOASOBI was going well as we entered late 2021, early 2022. Pretty much right after their debut, the group started releasing singles to gear up for the second entry in the book series, The Book 2, which saw a lot of refinement to the group's sound. Ayase had significantly broadened his instrumental palette, from orchestras to organic sounds to straight-up trap beats, making every track sound much more layered and complex than anything on the first EP. Ikota's singing had also significantly improved, being much more expressive and confident throughout, while still keeping her trademark moody vocal stylings intact. Their continued collaboration has also thankfully made it so that she doesn't sound like a human trying to sing like a robot all the time. These technical improvements smoothed out YOASOBI's sound for an even broader appeal, and undeniably lost some of the Book 1's amateurish charm in the process. But this refinement was still based on the same resonant foundation that I loved so much. The song still had those awesome, spiraling melodies and dramatic builds. In fact, I think this crop of songs is their most consistent tracklist and features some of their best, most infectious melodies. And the variety has only helped cover up some of the moments on the Book 1 that was too scant, even for a big fan like me. Ikota's newfound confidence both sounds goddamn amazing and brings a nice narrative cohesion between their two releases. As the instrumentals grow more lush and lively, of course, Ikota's vocals also sound increasingly human, finally broken out of the shackles of a digital soundscape. Not that the somber dramaticism of the Book 1 is entirely thrown out, but after getting recognition from the entire world, YOASOBI seems more content to also express the joy and sense of community you can get from music. These songs strike an interesting middle ground, where I can see them being consumed by chronically online nerds like their earlier work, but I can also picture them sung in front of like NHK, which they definitely did, a lot. However much their style had changed though, their stated core, novel into music, has not. Every song is still based on an amateur submitted short story, continuing their mission to embody stray voices of the world. Well, every song, besides two, Monster and Yasashi Suisei. Those songs are adapted from the manga series Beastars, and were used as the opening and ending of the second season. This was definitely a change of pace from the usual YOASOBI affair, but it wasn't exactly anything new. The second to last single in the book era was Gunjo, inspired by the manga Blue Period.
However, this is the first time the group made a proper anime opening, and it was, all in all, cool to see them finally do one considering the stylistic parallels. Also, I think both of these songs fit the series extremely well. Monster's ratty, distorted verses and dramatic, melodic chorus represents the conflicting aspect of the main character, Legoshi, and Suisei's amazing ballad was a really good encapsulation slash tribute to the tiger guy, fuck I forgot his name. So even though this could be seen as kinda getting away from their initial purpose, it seems like YOASOBI can collaborate with big time IPs and still get some pretty good results out of it, which considering the flexibility of their concept, could mean so many amazing opportunities to bring beloved stories into their sonic palette. Foreshadowing is a narrative device. So the year went on, and YOASOBI kept dropping more singles, and being the most popular thing in Japan, now collaborating with well-established authors for an entire EP. Everything commercially wise was still looking up for them, but things started feeling just a bit off. To start with, the songs started not really hitting. The production on each single just seemed increasingly strangely bland. I know it's mainstream pop music, I'm not expecting Arca or Sophie here, but something about these songs felt so plastic, and their dance vibes so boilerplate. Maybe it's the overuse of these really heavy, sloshy sounding synths, maybe it's just the unadventurous songwriting, I didn't know. But hey, nobody always releases bangers, and I still had faith that with a new big name collaboration, Gundam Wish from Mercury, they could pull off something interesting or cool. And what I got is one of the songs of all time for sure. Okay, songwriting, melody-wise, I don't think The Blessing is bad at all. That build-up to the final chorus, very nice, very cool. B-U-T, why does it sound like that? The song shows YOASOBI seemingly returning to more synthesized production, with even Ikota sounding more filtered than ever before. But instead of the fresh and blissful sound of their earlier work, I think it's trying to be badass with that blaring fucking synth that sounds like a 5-year-old's idea of a cool song, and the blabbering into the thinnest distortion effect of all time part. I guess they thought because it's Gundam, they had to make it like hard and metal and military. I'm not gonna call a record-breaking producer bad at producing. I'm sure all of this took effort I wouldn't understand, but I will say that as much as I try, I'm just not sold on the drama of the song. The mind-numbing pace and lack of space for any of the elements, be it the softer verses or the loud-ass bridge to breathe, just makes it sound kinda aesthetically incoherent. This means that even Ikota's amazing voice is dampened besides that one little part, because unlike the digitized youth of the book 1, I can't even interpret any rhyme or reason why she sounds like she's singing in the microwave. And if you want to say that I'm reading too deep into a song that's just trying to be catchy, buddy, have you been watching this video? And also, I genuinely don't think I'm being nitpicky here. Although previously, there were also abrasive relative sounds on Monster, for example, what ISA has always been good at is not hitting you over the head with melodies and sounds, and instead letting you slowly, subtly get mesmerized by them. Even on the more bombastic tracks in the book 2, he kept that same principle. But here, everything feels like it's being shoved down my throat, and I'm not into that. Yeah, this is the first time I really felt YOASOBI's sound shifting towards a place I didn't like. At the time, I didn't have the words to express why, because I thought the song was good and I still listen to it sometimes, but the execution of everything just bothered me. And as much as I love to talk about everything around the music, like most people, the sound, the visceral experience is what I gravitate to first and foremost. And when that was starting to lose me, I was disappointed. And unfortunately, it wasn't about to get that much better.
Hello, it's me, Kyrus. I'm just here to pop in for a quick intermission to thank my patrons who have supported the channel. I did not expect to make this for this video, so it's kind of, out of place. But yeah, thank you so much. And their names are on screen right now. Patreon, you know what Patreon is. It's the best way to support creators, especially smaller ones. And every donation helps to motivate me to make better videos faster and hopefully make this a living someday. If you donate right now, you get to have your name in the credits like these. A bonus video every month about whatever I'm into. You can ask me questions, and you can also see behind the scenes videos if I make them. Yeah, I'm just incredibly grateful for any amount of support I get. Thank you for watching so far, and I think the video goes to some interesting places after this point, so make sure to stick around. Thank you. Curious out. Bye-bye. Kicking off 2023, the duo released 2 more singles, which are some of their worst, most bland songs yet. The instrumentals are a dime a dozen, and Yukota sounds like she's on goddamn autopilot. And in the cruel twist of fate, a manga I had developed a long-standing toxic relationship with was going to have YOASOBI compose the opening for its anime adaptation. Yes, Oshinoko. For the full history, go watch my Oshinoko video, which, although was a bad conceit I would never do again, is still a video whose point I stand by. Needless to say, I was kind of flabbergasted. But hey, when I heard a snippet of the chorus for the first time in one of the trailers, I was hype. It sounded like YOASOBI was finally getting out of their slump and delivering incredible earworms once again. Even if I don't like the series, I was glad that at least I'll have a YOASOBI banger to go alongside it. What could possibly go wrong? Now, you can like Heido. Statistically, you do. But just from what I said about the blessing, I think you can understand why I hated this. This is garish. The fucking Soulja Boy crank that horns that kicks everything off genuinely made my jaw drop. Derogatory. ISA took the blessing and turned up the aesthetic incoherency until the fucking knob came off. Why are there these industrial drum sounds? What is this men's choir going off in the background? And the orchestra? Jesus Christ. From the amount of people enjoying the song, I'm sure these elements are actually cool to them. And I'll admit that in a vacuum, I think the drums do sound good. But altogether, it just sounds like an incomprehensible slosh of pastiches. I guess this is rap and pop and industrial, and I don't know. And while I was experiencing all of this as a stupid teenager, all I could think was to rage and bitch. In hindsight, I can see that this is the point where something crucial finally clicked in me, and I undoubtedly realized that this is not the art I fell in love with anymore. As CJDX, my actual non-binary parent, don't fact check that, argued with the help of their guy in this video, fashion as an art form is a social language. The way you dress signifies your adherence to a certain social group, and that sense of belonging in the world is really more important than holding up in your endless postmodern relativity of everything subjective. You just gotta figure out your own style, man. And this is not an excuse for right-wingers to be like, yes, I agree, we hate postmodernism and gay people. No, shut up. And although music is obviously different, I think some similar principles apply.
I am editorializing. I'm doing an interpret for storytelling purpose.
Music genres and music subcultures have conventions that are valued and have elements that signify themselves. The process of understanding them, embodying and utilizing those elements is how you actually make a dent in this long lineage of culture and art. This is not me saying blending genres is a bad thing, not in the slightest. I'm just saying you have to understand the genres before you try to make your own thing. Whether they can make their unique blend of emo, lo-fi, and fucking classical music good, because their understanding of those genres is so thorough. And even if something does happen to sound so incredibly idiosyncratic like My Glorious King Blade, the least you can usually do is trace its line of influences and find it situated somewhere in culture. It's a wonderful feeling to be a part of something, even if some of y'all don't like to admit it. Idol by YOASOBI, in contrast to these examples, fits into nothing. Its stylistic choices feel like spinning a roulette wheel. It doesn't understand what it's trying to even copy, which leaves the listener even more confused as to what it's supposed to be. The only word I can even think to describe it is catchy, which is a fine thing to be. God knows I know how hard it is to write something catchy. But it also tells us fuck all about what the musical elements of this musical piece mean. You can like the lyrics, I like them too, because it's about the only good part of Oshinoko at the beginning. But as a song, it's overdramatic, takes itself so seriously, but just comes off as incredibly obnoxious. So, just like the series is made for, okay, I'm sorry for that one. As I went into in the first part of this video, early YOASOBI was the complete opposite. They both fit in the scene of Yakose and had clear artistic influence / lineage in Vocaloid music. YOASOBI had a place in culture and meant something. Something I would even dare say was profound. And only 2 years later, this group lost all of that in exchange for something vapid, listless, and gaudy. The most vivid example of this is Ikura's voice. From digital vessel to a lively, one-of-a-kind vocalist, her subtle but beautiful journey throughout YOASOBI was once proof of its authenticity. It was her, not ISA, turning on the backing track in the first take. She was the representation of the faith of the masses, the one who trusted her to sing songs about their stories, the ones who saw something intangible but moving in her youthful voice. And now, several singles into this synthetic amalgamation, she sounds more like a Vocaloid than a human. This time, without any angle for clever subversion. It just sounds artificial. But hey, at least the charts love it. And love it they did. YOASOBI continued their activities hotter than ever before, breaking multiple records for Japanese artists on the Billboard Top 100, among other things, like Tim Henson of Polyphia fame covering Idol and spelling their group name wrong in this picture with them. I don't know why I mentioned that. By this point, I was crashing out, so I wasn't following their stuff as much anymore. I did peek into the free run opening like everyone else though, and found it interesting as a subversion of something you would expect for a fantasy series. Ikura's vocals sound robotic as they tend to do post-Idol, but the dramatic choir and string arrangements they can't let go of at least kinda makes sense for this particular show. And just as I thought I might be wrong, and that Idol was just a fluke, they hit me with the goddamn abomination that is undead. Satoru Kosaki didn't write one of the most atmospheric and iconic anime soundtracks of all time, only for the Monogatari series to represent this. This looks and sounds like a 2018 SoundCloud upload with 6 views by a guy called like LollyChoker42. Which I guess is culture, so we've talked about the disillusion of the visceral and the cultural, but we still haven't touched on the last thing. The contextual, which makes sense because when it sounds like this, I don't care about the context. But that's actually, I think, maybe the nail in the coffin for the old YOASOBI. In 2023, the Book 3 released without a single new song made specifically for the EP, whereas previous releases all had at least one. It's a subtle difference, and I know that this is kind of just how the Japanese music industry works, don't get on my ass, but its meaning is significant. YOASOBI has been officially delegated into a singles factory. Whereas contemporaries like Eve and Yorushika are still releasing, if not complete artistic visions, at least a collection of non-single tracks like a proper musician, YOASOBI has become a place to promote your brand. Because after burning off your influences and turning into an unidentifiable jumble of marketable sounds, what else is there to do? Since 2023, YOASOBI has made songs for Pokemon, NHK, and the fucking Olympics. It's so goddamn obvious that the main point is not to bring up voices of the internet generation anymore, but to prop up the biggest corporations as the most astronomically successful musical act in Japan right now. There's no purpose or heart to any of it. Ikura seems to think so too, as she released her solo album in 2023 full of forgettable pop songs, but at least songs where she doesn't sound like a quirked up anime girl. At this point, every aspect that made the earlier work of YOASOBI fascinating has been filtered and corporatized by the current YOASOBI. This progression has probably not mattered to any normal onlooker, but to me, an avid follower of them for years, it has been genuinely frustrating and even a little sad. What's sadder is that, of course, this is not uncommon in the music industry, West or East. However much people in the West want to flaunt about individuality and authenticity in their pop culture, we are nevertheless under the whims of the same corporations who exploit artists left and right, snuff out authentic voices, or drown them in a sea of mass appeal drivel. YOASOBI is a sobering reminder that art is never on the side of capital, and once it is, it ceases to be true, meaningful culture. Culture is made by people, not numbers. Oh, and wouldn't you look at that? Seems like YOASOBI just dropped another song, this time with PlayStation, Jesus Christ. Yep, shit sucks. Let's look up how manufactured the song is to bolster my point. Wait. This kinda sounds like... Site C. Hold on. As research for this video went more and more beyond my own years and past interviews, I realized something very important. While YOASOBI transformed into the husk of its former self as I claimed, the group still had never let up their novel to music initiative. They've maintained their unique approach to adaptation with every single, and in fact, is still doing exactly what I commended them for before, being a conduit for the voices of the masses in the internet age. They're even still hosting writing competitions. So it's clear that the contextual has never really changed. Maybe they've been the voice of the voiceless the whole time. Or maybe they've never been what I thought they were. Well, yes, as I said, the first singles were adapted from stories submitted by real amateurs. What I didn't say is that by the first, I mean like 2 of them. Looking on from the West, it's simple to assume otherwise because they were all presented the same. But looking closer at their release history, as soon as the 3rd song, they were already working with established, although lesser known to the West, writers, and their music was scoring sports drinks commercials. By their 5th, they were already, as aforementioned, doing adaptations of big-name manga titles. The subject matter of their songs has also pretty much never breached brand risk territory besides Yoru ni Kakeru. Most of them have been like the track New Me, which is about a girl who feels stressed at her workplace and then goes on a dating app and accidentally matches with an assassin. Oh, okay, I didn't lie when I said most of the songs on the book 1 and 2 were sourced from Monogatari.com, and that being my argument for how they stuck to their guns until they didn't, made sense. But that's missing the forest for the trees here. The problem, I realized, wasn't with them adapting or not adapting crowdsourced short stories. The problem was that there was no difference either way. When they had an original amateur story to adapt, they would take that story and transcribe it to lyrics of a song. When they had a brand deal post the book 2, they would just get a story written specifically for this occasion and do the exact same thing again. The adaptation gimmick is just that, a gimmick.
a format, a vessel for whatever YOASOBI needed to do next. There was no consistent commitment across the years, let alone any indicator for real artistic intent. So what I thought was the contextual meaning was probably just an assumption based on incidental observations. But if I got that wrong, what else might have been just an assumption, a misunderstanding? With this one crack in the contextual, it was like the floodgates had opened. More and more holes started to show in this narrative I've weaved and wholeheartedly believed in. To start with, there's probably just as much credence to the yakose scene as any other rate your music tag, like shitgaze, which is to say, like fuck all. If I wanted to talk about their apparent impact, the globalization of Japanese music, then it would apply to such a broad range of musicians that the category stops meaning anything. But maybe more importantly, I said 2 hours ago that YOASOBI began when Ayase was approached by Monogatari.com. But just like many articles covering them at the start, I didn't tell them who owns Monogatari.com. It's Sony Music Entertainment Japan, one of the 3 biggest music companies in the country. You could definitely say that from the very start, the group was corporate made, having access to resources that an independent artist would never have. Be it the marketing push for Yoru ni Kakeru, which they don't admit for a cleaner, more organic story, but come on, it's a record deal, obviously they're promoting it. Or the chance to immediately start on the first take, also owned by SMEJ. Not to mention, of course, all of their collaboration opportunities. The only time YOASOBI could have been called a ragtag operation was when Ayase was uploading Vocaloid covers. Even then, although the other half of the group, Ikura, was indeed a young, aspiring songwriter without much experience, she also already had a foot in the industry, was a part of a cover band, and had released a solo original EP before their first single. To call this duo at any point, in any form or fashion, the authentic voice of the people is fucking laughable. They've always been, and always will be, a corporate gimmick. So is it really a surprise that they're just fully gravitating towards that, now that they have the reach? So, I guess it was never actually about the contextual or the cultural. It's just that the music, their sound, no longer appealed to me specifically. I mean, it tracks. Even the music I liked from them before hinged a lot on me interpreting flaws in a way that felt coherent and meaningful. But who's to say any of it was intentional? Maybe the sound of the book 1 and 2 was purely of circumstance. Maybe the stylistic change was actually what Ayase wanted to make all along. And maybe this whole video has been based on a faulty story. The authenticity I was sold on ever since that brilliant performance on the first take, the J-pop underdog story of a decade, was exactly that. Something to sell you on. A narrative. And I was too busy comforting myself with my own narrative of a fall from grace, of the loss of authentic art, to realize that I bought into it in the first place. My first stubborn reaction was to declare a death of the author and say that my experience is still valid, that my interpretation is still possible, because at the end of the day, it's all subjective and nothing is confirmed for sure. As I've said earlier though, I've grown tired of how quick we are to use the subjective word to deflect any broader reflection of art, and the reality that we all, in fact, live in a socialized environment, symbolic order, lacan, blah blah blah. But what I wanted to do even less is use my subjective reactions as a springboard to try to justify a grander, culturally significant narrative, only to fall flat on my face. And that's what this has all been. An obsession I share with the people who consume and spread stories with coherent arcs and climaxes about art, artists, and life. A compulsive desire to be right, to make sense of things, to say something meaningful. Instead of pushing on with something incomplete, but coherent, and let's be honest, more consumable than whatever the fuck this is, I wanted to highlight this reality. How that part of me that needed a narrative to understand the world around me failed to let me see a broader picture. People say humans are separated from other animals because they can tell stories, and I think, that tracks. But if the last, century has told us anything, it's that this effort itself might have been misguided. This is still about YOASOBI, I swear. Some of you might be wondering why I'm making such a big deal out of the simple fact that I got a story wrong, and kinda made the first half of the video obsolete. First of all, thank you for sticking around so far, I really mean it. But if you think that, I'm sorry to tell you, you just fell into the same trap I told you I did. Because Side C has also been a narrative, just a different one. It's full of assertions of how things must work, assumptions of how the lives of these people I never fucking met went, and interpretations that are informed by my biases as a disgruntled audience member. This is not the full story by any means, and the whole point is that there is no full story. While the order I've presented them in might have made you lean towards one or the other, in the end, the facts haven't changed. These are two narratives, directly contradictory of each other's entire conceit, existing at the same time, with neither being truly more or less valid than the other. While one could be called a reach, the other could very well be accused of being too cynical. And that is the point I truly wanted to get to with this video. Not the realization that narratives have faults and reality is a larger, complicated picture, but that the state of indefinite contradiction is reality. So it's like Umineko, but common sense has taught us that we eventually have to pick. People, in order to not go insane, usually end up deciding on what they value more and choose to focus on the story that brings them more happiness, clarity, or some other thing. It's interesting, but not healthy to keep thinking in these grand terms and forget to get your groceries for the week. I get that. But in this case, I don't want to pick. I'm not very smart, but either narrative here has meant different things to me. Some inspiring and some sobering. And the very act of choosing and disregarding another seems to betray a part of myself that might never come back. This is, in short, my YOASOBI Dilemma. Not the dilemma of choosing one narrative over the other, but the inherent problem with the choice. So yeah, I don't know what to do here. Oh, the lights are coming on. Let's get ready. On a boring summer day in 2023, I stumbled across a new upload on the YOASOBI channel, a recording of Idol from their first ever stadium tour in Saitama. Even in my peak YOASOBI fandom, I never watched much of their live performances, because they kinda sucked. While ISA's breath-killing production could be kept up with in edited recordings, Ikura early on is very audibly struggling to sing all the notes live. Moreover, since the production was so synthesized, and the appeal of the music for me stemmed so much from that digital quality, I didn't see how a live rendition would enhance my enjoyment. And that was for songs I liked, so the groan I got from finding this on my recommended was probably like a narwhal on Fent. But once I hit play, something immediately felt different. The abrupt opening of Idol had been replaced with a foreboding, orchestral build-up as the stage lights flare around the filled-out arena, all waving purple light sticks. As Sikura declares, "Thank you for the encore. How about we set aflame one last time?" The crowd bursts into a wave of cheers. Just like that, the sense of scale the recorded version so desperately tried and failed to convey was right there. And it was when the audience started rhythmically chanting back at parts of the song that I realized this is where the song belonged. Every jarring, industrial beat of the instrumental suddenly made so much more sense. This is how the song's essence should be conveyed. On top of all of that was Ikura. My biggest problem with the studio version to this day, how robotic she sounds through all of that vocal processing, was rendered a non-issue in this performance, as her singing brought out an energy and expressiveness I haven't heard from her in a long time. But crucially, she doesn't just sing well, she performs. More than any other YOASOBI concert I'd seen before that point, she is captivating on stage, dancing and gesturing around to fully embody the energy and the character described in the song. She feels playful, reveling in this glamorous moment, but at the same time, cunning and unpredictable. This excessively emotive persona suggesting the darkness bursting at the seams better than the studio version or the series is adapting ever did. It feels genuinely impossible that this is the same person who started that background track in her home studio just 3 years ago. As the song's reaching its climax after the bridge, and as Ikura increasingly puts her all into this performance, the crowd goes absolutely ballistic. The musicians on stage can't contain their excitement, and the energy builds and builds until it all explodes along the pyrotechnics into this infectious, joyous atmosphere. I was fucking entranced. Here was this musician, singing the song about suffering as the perfect corporate creation made of lies, while being that perfect performer. And just like we can't look away. She's vibrant. She's glowing. And as the performance ended, my mind was restless, excited, trying to make sense of all of this. But one thing above all was made abundantly clear to me. This is what YOASOBI is now. It might not be Ikura on the first take. It might exist in this contradictory reality where it is both a staunch, cultureless corporate sellout and two true artists fallen from grace, but from all of those paradoxes, something new has arisen. A surreal embodiment of their commercialized nature that somehow feels more authentic, moving, and culturally significant than ever. Is this a redemption from their descent into soullessness, or is this another blip in their corporatized career? It doesn't cleanly fit into either, yet acknowledge elements of both in its existence, because it is what's been built on top. Or maybe it could be something simpler, and I just really liked witnessing the drastic progression of this artist. But I don't know if figuring out an answer matters anymore. We live in an infinite kaleidoscope of ideas, lives, and stories that often refuse to comfort us with a satisfying conclusion. And we can stop thinking and accept one of the many narratives as good enough and move on with our lives. But embracing that uncertainty, that paradox, and finding the art and the beauty possible within that may just reveal something that feels more true. I had plenty of time to toil with the script and try to describe what is it that I exactly felt, what is so good about this new page they're turning apparently, and every time, words kind of fail me. But for once, I'm happy about that. It doesn't have to be a dilemma. Contradiction doesn't need to be the end. It can be a new beginning. Thank you for watching. Get it? It's like the four sides of a vinyl, because, you know, like music. Oh, hello, the father of deconstruction, Jack Derrida. Ah!